How many people in the room have a title of executive director or CEO right now? Okay, so the next slide is for you guys, and everybody else pay attention, because the nonprofit sector needs 80,000 new leaders a year to replace the retiring and the transitioning people that are transitioning out. So this is what you're going to be going into if you choose to found, or how many of you founded a nonprofit? Any of you founded? Okay, so yes, great. So if you found a nonprofit, start one, or if you become an executive director, life is going to look a lot like this. It's a pressure cooker, isn't it? Yeah. So with a business, leadership is hard enough. In business, you're the boss, you have a staff, you serve clients, and if you serve them well, they resource your business. They provide the revenue for you. But nonprofit leadership is totally different. You're the executive director, but you're not the boss, because the board is your boss. And they often think that they individually are your boss, not as a group that meets once a month or once a quarter. They sometimes all try to boss you, and sometimes we have some ugly bullying going on. That's not good. So you have this group up here that's your boss. You have the staff that is tugging at you, feeling like you should have all the answers and you should know everything that's going to happen. Then you have the clients that you serve, but they don't resource what you do. Who resources what we do? Donors. You're getting drawn and quartered on a regular basis as a CEO of a nonprofit. It's so challenging. Is it any wonder that 67% of executive directors want to leave their job in the next 5 years? That's the statistics that consistently keep coming out. In our research with Concord Leadership Group, we found out that only 1 in 5 leaders feel extremely confident about their leadership abilities. In fact, 1 in 10 feel like they have very little confidence in their abilities. So if you look at that may seem a little confusing. Think about this room. About 1 in 5 of you, if you're at your table, maybe 2 at your table feel like, yeah, I got this. 1 in 10 of you feel like, I don't even know why I'm here. But the rest of you are not really sure about your confidence in your ability, because leadership isn't just the CEO title, right? It's the influence that you have. So some of you are influencing your department, some of you are influencing volunteers, some of you are influencing donors, all of us here. Everybody in a nonprofit should have a title fundraiser on their business card, because if they like getting paychecks from the nonprofit, they better be contributing in some fashion to the fundraising. Am I right? That would be an applause line. Come on. Thank you. All right. This is AFP, I know, come on. We have to stand up for the profession. So the reason that so many people are lacking confidence, well, part of the problem with leadership is that we think that confidence is a qualifier. If we feel unsure about ourselves, we feel like we're broken and we must not be an effective leader. We probably have something wrong. We probably shouldn't have even shown up to take this position at all. But it's because we don't know there's a map. So on the map, there's this axis. Confident to unsure. And we look at cues. That's the other axis. So normally, this is where the leader's journey is. And think about this in terms of your own life whenever you've had the opportunity to lead. You start out in quadrant 1. You're totally confident, and you have all these external cues because you've seen people lead before. You know it works. You know you've had bosses. You've had bad bosses too, so you know what you don't want to do. And you're just jazzed because they gave you charge over something to do. And so you're doing your thing. You know, leadership experts say if you're leading and you turn around and no one's following you, you're just out for a walk. And when that starts happening, you realize that stuff that you saw your bosses and other people do isn't working for you. You start waning in confidence, and you start going into quadrant 2 leadership, which is the experiment stage. This is where you start looking at books and trying to listen to podcasts and go to sessions, go to marketing seminars, and you just consume as much as you can because something is critically broken. The stuff that looks like works in quadrant 1 isn't working for you, so you're desperately trying to find what will work for you. Has anybody here read the book Getting Things Done? No, okay, David Allen, all right, David Allen wrote this book, Getting Things Done, and it's typical of books in quadrant 2. Books, they look like they're gonna solve your problems, and you're desperate to have that one silver bullet. What's that one magic thing that we can do to make it so that I can be a successful leader of my organization or my department or my life? Getting Things Done is this great series of, David Allen basically says you write lists. If you put everything that's in your head into a list, and you put them into organized files, you can have a great peace of mind because you know where to find stuff. If it's the next project, you know you can go to this list. But it doesn't work for a lot of us. There are some fanatics. They call themselves, GTD is like, they're like a cult. They love this stuff. And so we look at this as leaders and we think, oh my goodness, this doesn't work for me, so I must be broken because people love this. And the quotes on the back of the book say it changed their life. And so we get stuck in this quadrant, just looping around with, okay, that didn't work, so we'll have to look for something else. I used to work at a hospital, and we did something called fish philosophy. Has anybody seen that as a corporate culture thing? It's like a curriculum in a box. Ken Blanchard has them. Their fish philosophy was done from the fishermen on the pier in Seattle. They actually throw fish to each other, and so we would get rubber fish to throw to each other to throw a compliment. So it was a visible showing a compliment thing. But organizations can get stuck in this quadrant too, where they're doing those fish philosophy things every quarter or every year. It's sort of like the balloon drop, and this is the fad of the month. This is the management fad of the month that we're going to do. Why we get stuck here is that most of us don't realize there's more to the map. There's this internal part that you have to listen to. It's your intuition, your gut. And we're taught not to listen to this. We're taught you shouldn't have your feelings at work. You should just get the job done, and you should just do these things. And there's a lot of shoulding that goes on. But when we move into quadrant 3 and start listening to the questions that you have, not so much the inner critic. We all have an inner critic, which is not necessarily helpful for us. But there are things like when you're reading Getting Things Done, and you're thinking, this just doesn't work for me. In quadrant 3, you start analyzing what it does work. What of that book works? And for me, Getting Things Done, the part was you write the lists, but his magic was you write an action step after you write the to-do. So when you write a to-do item, you write what's the next action you have to take. That was life-changing for me. I couldn't keep the lists, I couldn't keep the folders, I couldn't do all this other stuff. But now I know whenever I have a list, I'm gonna write what's the next step, and that speeds up the actual rev up time. So you don't have to go, what did I mean by that task item? You just know, I have to make this phone call, or I have to send out this invitation, or I have to send out this thank you. And in quadrant 3 leaders go through this process of just kind of pulling together the people that they've learned from and the stuff that they've learned and making it their own and trusting their gut. Because leadership, I firmly believe, I've been coaching leaders as a Franklin Covey certified coach for 15 years now. It is the scariest thing that we can do on this planet. It's the most rewarding thing we can do on this planet, but it's scary too, because if homes, often parents are telling us what to do and giving us the measure of success. At school, teachers are setting the agenda for us and telling us how we're graded or not, if we did well or not. In work, supervisors tell us that. But when you become the leader of an organization, in particular as a CEO, no one's given you a curriculum. They just expect you to have all the answers. And so you have to press into that discomfort. And as you do press into that and you start pulling these things together and realizing how you work and how your organization works, you move into quadrant 4, which is that focused leader, where it's not nirvana. I'm not going to do a quadrant 3 like, your life will be glorious. But you now know the map that you've been on, and you're able to look at things much more critically and see what's the good. As a mentor once told me, it was eat the chicken, spit out the bones. Where's the chicken in this book or in this program, or what are the good people to follow? And you can also take other people through that. You can look at the people that are in your life and think, okay, are they quadrant 1? And if they're in quadrant 1, that's a good stage of leadership. It helps you learn who to follow, who's trustworthy to follow. Because you can't be an effective leader if you're not a good follower. Part of the problem we have leadership issues in our country today is because we have people that don't think they need to follow, they just need to be the boss. And that makes them very unsafe and loose cannons. So quadrant 1 is necessary. Quadrant 2 is great because you learn how to learn. Are you an audio learner? Are you a reader? Some of us are kinesthetic, so if we're on a treadmill or something, it locks in the information better if we're listening or reading it. Design, some people aren't really audio or listening to me, they'll forget, or reading a book, they'll forget, but if they're doodling, they'll help lock it in better. And then quadrant 3 is where you start really trusting yourself as you go into that focused leadership. So let's look at analyze the quadrant 3 aspect. This is where we're going to spend the rest of the time in this talk. You're going to leave here with 9, I don't even know how to do this, 9 tools that you can use this year to grow your leadership wherever you are. And then we're going to look at a real life example of how being a focused leader can change the way working in your nonprofit can be, whether you're a department leader, a division leader, a frontline employee, or the CEO. You guys ready for the journey? Okay, good. All right. So the way that I'd work with coaching clients is I have 3 different areas in Quadrant 3 leadership. There you look at your hardwiring. We're going to look at your identity. We're going to also look at your goals. And as those overlap, they help show your personal style, your mission, your vision. And when you get all of those working together, you're able to work in integrity with all cylinders firing together and things moving together in your life so you don't feel like you're getting all totally pulled apart. Let's look at your hardwiring. Hardwiring, how many people here have done a DISC assessment? Okay, a lot of you. That's the typical type of hardwiring we look at. But there's actually 3 areas that help leaders grow in their leadership. There's the abilities, or the ability kind of hardwiring, the behavior hardwiring, and the motivation hardwiring. So let's look at the ability hardwiring. Has anybody heard of the Highlands Ability Battery? It was done out of North Carolina. What they did was they looked at corporate cultures. They took a whole bunch of tests from corporations. One of them was hotels. They wanted staff that could come into a room, cross the threshold, and know immediately that the ashtray was 2 inches off from where it should be. Yes, it's an old test. We don't have ashtrays in our hotel rooms anymore, I know. But there are some people that have that kind of design memory where they're able to push it aside. And so the people in Highlands, in North Carolina at the Highlands Company, took all these tests together, 19 of them. And you take it under time pressure. So it's looking at a random group of letters that correspond to a word and trying to match them. It's looking at a picture and seeing if you can remember what objects were removed. There's all sorts of seemingly stupid things you do, but you do it under a time pressure, and it forces you to see what comes naturally to you and what doesn't. Because if we know what comes naturally to us, we're able to put ourselves into that space better. And if we know what doesn't, we'll know to build more time. For example, when I was running a foundation at the hospital, I was tasked, I don't know why this was, but I was tasked with writing the minutes to our board meeting. So we'd have our board meeting. We had a secretary. I don't know what his job was because I was the one that was doing the minutes. And my boss said, well, that's good because you can shape the narrative. So you could say everything that everybody said, but you can really shine the light on the stuff that will really help you. And all right, thanks. But I knew because of the Highlands Ability Battery that I am clear at communicating, but paperwork just takes a long time for me. And it's not an excuse, it's just a reality. So what I would do is an 1.5-hour meeting once a month, and then I'd block the next 3 to 4 hours to get those minutes out. Because if I didn't, the next month would come and there'd be no minutes for the board meeting. But it was the Highlands Ability Battery that helped give me some insights into that, and it just was objective data. Another area of hardwiring that's really helpful is the DISC assessment that you guys have. No, these are your behaviors. You can tell with DISC, it's caloric, sanguine, melancholy, phlegmatic, DISC. There are dogs and other animals that you can do with this. There's all sorts of colors. I think some people have this 4-quadrant thing. But basically, are you fast-paced and are you reserved? And are you task-centered or are you people-centered? You can see this in other people. Clearly, I'm fast-paced because I talk quickly. But there are some people that actually have the superpower of being able to think before they speak. Those are the more reserved folks. Shocking, I know. For a lot of us, it's shocking, especially in a room of fundraisers. When I do this and other times, I actually move the room around and have everybody stand in their quadrants. And there's often a dominant quadrant of the people-centered, fast-paced people. And they actually tend to not shut up during the rest of the training. They're all like, oh, hey, how are you? Talking to each other. But you can also observe task and people. Do people talk about the project first, or do they talk about the people first? And you can observe these things, and you can observe how it works with you and start learning to speak in your local dialect. In the hospital situation that I was at back in Maine, I knew my boss was a high D, high C. He did not care at all. It was all task. He did not care at all about people. Now, of course, he cared about people, but not in the way I understood. I would tell him about the gala. Did you see the gala? Oh my goodness, did you see who was there? The relationships were there, and she's related to the cousin of this person's nephew and that person's family, and that means that we could get this family foundation. He'd glaze over. He just said, I need to know. And to the point where he as a leader, limited me to every other week. I was his direct report. I got to speak to him for 15 minutes every other week, one-on-one. Running the fundraising for an entire hospital. But he wanted to know, what are you doing? What do you need me to do? And where are we at as far as fundraising goes? Those are the 3 questions he wanted me to ask. So I had to go back to DISC. And okay, all right, I'm not being rude if I just cut to the chase. He wants me to cut to the chase. I have to speak his dialect. Now, another part of hardwiring is the Enneagram, your motivations. Has anybody seen the Enneagram? I think some of you. I love the Enneagram, and I've been studying it for about 30 years. I've started working with my coaching clients and teaching it in the last year. The Enneagram is this really complex-looking 9-part personality type indicator, but instead of behaviors or hardwiring, it looks at your motivation. Some people are head-centered people, they're thinkers. Some people are heart-centered people, they're feelers. Some people are gut-centered people, they're doers. And you look at, there are 3 numbers in each of those 3 centers, and it helps you understand yourself, what works for you. I'm working with an executive director right now who wants a system for how to work fundraising into his busy operation. And I will not just give him a cookie cutter template of this is what you should do at this hour and this is what you should do at the next hour, because I didn't know what his motivations were or how he defined success. I'm working with another executive director of a foundation who is very relational. And I actually apologized to her after 4 months of coaching because 10 minutes is just visiting of our 45-minute call. And I checked in with her. I said, Allison, are you good with this? You're a 2, which is a helper. She just really has this intuitive superpower of helping other people. And she loves the relationship. So anchoring in relationship for her helps make the rest of the call more meaningful. But I had to just check in because that's not my type at all. I'm a 7, which is like always on to the next thing. We're always thinking about the next thing, and we're super fast talkers and doers. So, but because we know our hardwiring together, we can make sure that we're meeting each other's needs and we're able to interact well. And you can use this in fundraising too, since this is a fundraising group. You're not supposed to type other people. So the behavior-based hardwiring tests are good because you can see observe their behaviors. With the Enneagram, 2 people may be looking the same way. I'm very goal-centered, but I'm a 7, which puts me in the head center. 3s are also very goal-centered, but they're in the heart center. And we do things for very different reasons. They want to succeed. I just want to avoid pain. I want new opportunities. I want to do new things. And so for me, achieving goals is avoiding pain. It's preserving my life, as opposed to looking, I don't care if I look successful or not. I'll tell people when I screw up. I'm very open. But as a 3, that would be the last thing they'd want to do. And so we can, as you get to know some of your own motivations, you can have more grace for other people's motivations and start figuring out, why is that board member like that? Why is he such a jerk to me? Oh, maybe this is some of the things that he's looking for. I know none of you have that. That's why I chose a board member who's a jerk. All right. So this is all part of Quadrant 3 leadership. So one of the things you could do this year to grow in your influence is to figure out, maybe it's the Highlands Abilities Battery you want to look at, or maybe it's a DISC assessment. There are a ton of them online. Maybe it's the Enneagram. The Enneagram should not be an assessment-based tool, but assessments can help shortcut the learning process. So if you want to do the assessment for the Enneagram, I'd recommend going to the Riso Hudson Institute. I think it's enneagraminstitute.com. They have a $12 test, or reading the book Road Back to You by Ian Cronin and Susan Stabile. Susan Stabile is one of the best Enneagram teachers I've ever heard from in my 30 years of studying it. And she's just got a lot of material that's coming out now. Let's look at your identity. This is an area where most leaders don't even think about. But we are story-based creatures. Jane Goodall calls us primates who tell stories. If we had an operating system, your phones either have an Android operating system usually or an Apple operating system. Well, humans have a story operating system. This is how we make sense of the world. When something happens to us, we're immediately trying to fill in the blanks and try to figure out why was that, what's the why behind that, who are the characters. There are 3 areas of story that can help with leadership. The first one is your stock stories. Do you have a kind of a handful of stories that you use when you're meeting new people? Yeah, I just got done dropping my son off at college, and he wanted me to hang out with him for a couple of days. I know, I'm fortunate, and I was dumb enough to think, well, I don't have time. And then my wife and I realized, no, we were going to make time. He wants to hang out with me. But I noticed all the people I met with him, I have a certain stock kind of script that I go through of introducing myself to new people. So we often have that about ourselves, but there's also the inner stock stories. There's the stories like, I'm really good with faces, but I can never remember names. And so what we need to do as leaders is, and wherever we're at in our leadership, is list those out. I help run this conference called the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. One time going to the first one, I realized, I better figure out my stories. And I started writing just 1-line kind of reminders of the stories that I tell that help define who I am and what I do. 600 came over the course of a few days. I mean, we are just filled with stories. So the reason you want to know this as a leader is if you say something like that lie to yourself of, I'm really good with faces but not with names, your subconscious, Maxwell Maltz in Psychocybernetics says your subconscious is just a servant trying to do a good job and prove you right. So if you tell yourself, I can remember faces but not names, your subconscious is going to go through the file cabinet and pull out the stories. Oh yeah, remember that? You remembered her face, but you couldn't remember her name. Oh yeah, and that time you totally blew it when you didn't remember that guy's name. Just trying to help you. Just trying to be a good subconscious. Just trying to do your thing. I call my subconscious Junior. It just helps. That was free. I didn't know I was going to say that. But so then Junior, but if you start scripting yourself differently, if you start saying, wait a minute, memory is memory. If I can remember faces, I probably can remember names too. And start telling yourself, I'm really good with faces and I'm getting better with names. Then Junior will help. Go through the filing cabinets. Oh yeah, there was that one time you get that person's name right. And it'll start building up those stories. So we can start reprogramming how we operate in the world and the stories that we use to define success. There's the characters. There's this one author called John Eldridge who wrote a book called Epic. And basically part of his thesis is that as storytelling creatures or beings, we live in story. And we're the hero of our own story. So we can learn a lot by looking at the stories that we like and the characters that we resonate the most with. This is the one that freaks out my coaching clients the most because it's a homework assignment. It's think about what stories you really keep going back to, movies or books, and then who do you resonate the most with? So there's a predictable journey that this happens. The first part is people think this is silly because most stories we relegate to reading to the kids before bed. We don't really think of story as a serious leadership thing. And then they look at the movies or their books and they realize everybody wants to be that character. This is so trite and I'm so shallow because I resonate with this person. So let me tell you about Marc. Marc's a guy who runs a large broadcasting or a nonprofit. And he was in a combative situation and he allows me to tell this story, where the labor union was attacking him, trying to get him fired because the labor union wanted to go back to the 50s when TV was the big thing instead of radio and digital. And he was, as a CEO, trying to lead them into digital and trying to capture new audiences and really serve the people that were in their broadcast area. So he was willing to submit to this, and he came back to me the next week and he said, you know what? Only two people, Sean Connery in Hunt for Red October and Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves. I don't know what to do with that. But we started unpacking it. Both of them were military people. Both of them were not trusted by their army and their leaders because they were willing to try to learn the enemy language and learn the enemy's ways and try to figure out how maybe we could work together. Maybe we could coexist. So they became a threat to their existing structures and they became kicked out, which was exactly where Marc was. The labor union wanted to kick him out even though he was trying to learn this new way of digital and trying to figure out how to serve people. It became a touch point that we had throughout the rest of the coaching calls. So think about that for you too. Go push through this is so silly. I just had one client list about 50 people that she resonated with, but in categories for why she did. That's abnormal. There was one woman in, it is. There was one woman in Chicago who the two people she resonated with were Princess Leia, and Katniss. And I said, why? And she said, because Princess Leia is royalty, but she can kick ass. And I need to kick ass in my job, and I need to do it with my head held high like royalty. And Katniss got the job done and didn't let anything dissuade her. This particular woman had a board member who had just told her, I don't know why we even do what we do. I think we're just a jobs program for you and the staff. She was totally getting attacked. So the stories can be very helpful in figuring out how you script your own life. And then the last one is morbid. I understand this, but it can be very helpful to think about what do you want people to say about you when you die. Project yourself in the future and somebody's giving your eulogy, and what will they say? That can be hard to do at first. So it could be, what if you were to die this afternoon? What would somebody say today? What would they say about your work ethic, your life, your family? What would your friends say about you? What would your kids say about you, or your loved one's partner, spouse? And then if you can see, there are gaps from, this isn't the way I'd want it to be, and then you can think about it moving forward. But those three different types of stories, stock stories, getting aware of the stock stories you're using to tell yourself, getting a clue into some of the other identity, the people that you resonate with. Usually it's good, it's usually not a bad thing. And then also figuring out, what do you want your end to be? I'm a Franklin Covey coach, so I had to begin with the end in mind in here at least once, which is the eulogy. Begin with the end of your life in mind. Now, there's a third area, right? Goals. I've saved this for last because we get goals. There's a lot of books on goals and goal setting. But what I did back, I'm weird. I said that other leader was weird. I'm weird too. I grew up in a family where we had schoolwork that we had to do, and then I had homework because I was a Pitman. My parents gave me, you're a part of this family, you're going to read these books, you're going to listen to these motivational tapes. And it was tapes. It was the 80s. We would listen to one side of a Zig Ziglar tape and take notes, and then listen to the next side the next day. So I've been studying goal setting for about 30 years. About 10 years ago, I took all the different parts. I didn't realize I was pressing into Quadrant 3, but I took all the different parts that I had studied and made them this thing called magnet goals. And I'll be glad to, if you want to give me your card after, I'll send you a link that you can get the magnet goals workbook for free. Because I want you to have this. I find to be really, really transformative for people. So the first step of it is write a list of 100. You just list out 100 things you want to do. I do it normally for the year. The first time I did this, I did it for my life, because 100 is daunting. And this is what usually happens. Think about the 100 things that you want to do in a year. You're going to have some silly things in there too. You can't all be serious about this. So usually the first 10 go really quickly. I want to have this income, I want to weigh this much, I want to have this, I want to do that. And then there's this lull. And the next 10 are so hard to get to. But then you get into another spurt. And it could be just like hyper segmenting. I want to plant peas, I want to plant carrots, I want to plant tomatoes, instead of garden, you have all the different things you want to do. Oh wait, I can scratch out garden and get like 20 different things. I want to weed on a regular basis, I want to fertilize. So then you put them in the drawer. If you did nothing else but had that list of 100 and you came back a year later, you'd be shocked at how much you had already accomplished just by writing them down on paper. I had a friend that called me up 2 years after trying this. He only got to 30. But one of his big kind of crazy, there's no way this is ever going to happen goals, he was living as a reality. And he then found the list and he realized, I never even thought of this until I did this list. For me, one of my crazy ones is to be interviewed positively by Oprah. I believe you really need to be specific. For many years, it was to be interviewed by Oprah, and then I saw a 60 Minutes thing, and I realized, I don't want a hatchet job. I don't know if she would do a hatchet job, but I'll just say be positively interviewed by Oprah. And even though the show isn't on anymore, she's still an influencer, and so I still put that on there. But write the list out. Then let it sit for a few days and write the history of the future. This is where you look at your list of 100 and you think, what will I feel like if I do all this in 12 months? It's using story again to kind of anchor these goals. What will people say about me? It's only usually a half a page or so that you put in there, but you put it into story. So what if? What would it be like? What would people say? What would my bank account be? How would I feel? It's like you're looking back on all the accomplishments you've done. Then you put it aside for a few days. It's an iterative process. And then you find the magnet goals. So you go back, and if you want to review your history of the future, you can. But you go back, you look at your list, and you start, I do it in two passes. The first one's with a Sharpie, just putting dots next to the items that seem to make sense to me. Like, that seems like there's two ways that things make sense. One is, if I do this one goal, all these other goals will get taken care of also. And the other one is, it just kind of pops. It kind of gives me a little bit of joy or an adrenaline rush or something. When I was doing this the first time, and if you get the workbook, you'll see the story in there. Ballroom dancing lessons with my wife was one that just kind of popped. It had nothing to do. I had just started being an entrepreneur. I was desperately trying to feed my family. I didn't know what I was doing. Leaving the school that I left was a traumatic experience at the time. And the ballroom dancing classes just seemed silly. But I pressed it in there, and I kept it in there, honored it, created a map for it, and worked on it for the next 12 months. And it was shocking. A year later, my wife told me that was one of the most meaningful goals in my life for her, because she knew that she was still the one I was married to, not my new business. So pay attention to the intuition. Put the dots on there, and then review it again and choose maybe 6 or 7, maybe 5 that are the ones you're going to work on, and create a roadmap, which there also is in the workbook. You list out your goal. You list out what you want to do and the date you need to get them done, kind of the steps that need to be accomplished to accomplish that goal, and the date, because goals without dates are just fantasies. So you have to put a date on there. And then you also can put down the people that are the influencers that will help you get each of those done. And then you put down the obstacles that you may face. I used to hate doing that because I grew up reading positive mental attitude stuff. But we're going to face obstacles. So write them out in the advance, and then who are the people that can help with that? And then also at the bottom of your map, write who's your coach or accountability partner. It can be a peer. You guys can peer accountability to each other. It's usually somebody outside your organization and outside of your home that has a permission to hold you to account. Hey, you said you were going to make 10 calls last week. Did you do it? And that will skyrocket your chances of success at accomplishing these goals. So that's an aspect of looking at goals in Quadrant 3 leadership. Hardwiring goals, identity. I want to quick journey. Some people here wanted to look at strategic planning. So I want to talk about a story-based strategic plan. We talked about this last year when I was here. I'm going to go through this quickly, only in part because my wife 2 years ago kicked me out of the house and said, you need to take yourself on a strategic planning retreat like you do with nonprofits. I can't do this for you. You just need to go. So I went to the Hampton down at 385, got all these Post-it note paper and stuff, and changed the questions to be for me. So the first question usually is, what are we doing and why? I made it, what am I doing and why? This is where your kind of mission, your personal mission, your values, what are the things that you value about? And knowing your values can be incredibly important, because then you can see if there's stress in your life, maybe it's because your organization doesn't mirror your values. And there's two choices you have then. Well, I guess three. You can stay and live with the tension. You can look for something outside of yourself that has those values expressed, or you can look for a new place to work. But if you don't know it, you just have this uneasy kind of stress constantly. And so knowing your values is important. So that's where the first question. Then how am I going to get it done? What are the ways we're going to do this? I'm going to work this way. I'm going to have this type of thing. I'll maybe do a side hustle, whatever it is. Third question, how am I going to fund it? How am I going to resource it? That's where you can put the side hustle in there too. And then finally, who am I going to tell about it? With nonprofits, this is your elected officials, whether it's national, regional, state, municipal. But for us, it could be people in your industry that you need to talk to. I think everybody here should have, at least on one speed dial, a newspaper reporter or a TV reporter. We need to be telling our stories better than we are. And we need to be friends to the media, not just when we have something we want them to push, but when we see a story that may be of interest to them. Learn their beat, learn who they are. Who else do you have to tell? Your board, your boss, your supervisor. One of the things that I used to do at a school I used to work at was, I was in alumni relations, totally unquantifiable. It's all relationships. So I took a spreadsheet and just put 2 pages, and I tried to fill it up every week with touches. Anybody I came in contact with, I wrote down their name, and whether it was an email or letter or a phone call, because I wanted to make sure I was mixing it up. I would opt for email most of the time, or if it was face-to-face. And then I would photocopy both sides and put my boss's initials, FYI, my initials, and leave it in her inbox. I just wanted to let her tell the story of, hey, 120 touches were made without you having to do anything. Stuff is getting done. So think about who are the people that you should be telling the story with. Now let's look at this. I promised to let you see it and how it will look in real life. All right, this is a typical CEO situation. Board sets goals for the CEO. And they're sort of arbitrary, because the board, we don't really do a good job training our boards. So they're sort of like double your fundraising goal because we need to have more money, and which is not usually sustainable, or 5% increase in employee satisfaction or something like that. And then the CEO takes those goals and then knows that this is her report card for the year. Then she turns to her staff and tries to be a good servant leader and says, okay, what do you guys need to do your goals? How can I help you do your things? And so she gets all of their input, and she's torn between the two for the rest of the year. Because when she's working with her staff, she knows that she's not working on the stuff the board set for her objectives and her evaluation, if she gets one. 67% of CEOs don't get an annual evaluation. It's awful. We have to know how we're doing. So anyway, I won't go down that road. But when she works on the board, her staff wonders, well, where'd she go? She's off doing her own thing. She's talking to donors, or she's doing these other things. Why isn't she? Where is she? Now, think about this in terms of the strategic plan, either the 4 questions organizationally or you internally, just talking with your boss. If you're the CEO and you don't get this assessment, this could be a way of working it with your boss, your board. You could talk together and say, what do we want for this organization and what will help us get there in the next year? You have a conversation together. And then out of that flows, you go to your staff, you take these as a CEO or as a department chair or as a division leader, and then you go to your staff and you don't say, now what do you want from us? You say, here's the organization's goals or the department's goals or the division's goals. Where do you see yourself playing in this? I was just doing this with a person yesterday, and he wasn't going to do that. He was just going to say, well, the programming person would do programs, and the fundraising person will do fundraising, and the CFO person will do financing. But I've often worked in nonprofits with CFOs that wanted to help with fundraising. And that's wonderful because they get to tell the story in a way that I don't necessarily understand. So asking them, where do you see yourself falling in this, can help bring out some areas that will increase job satisfaction for them and help you get your goals done in advance, and faster. In fact, for this particular leader, he has to focus on one area of the strategic plan. But I said, that doesn't mean you have to put the other 3 on the shelf. You have staff that can work this too. And so all of a sudden, he's now going with them and having their goals, all the day-to-day work that they're doing is being done in integrity with the strategic plan. And this could be in your own life too, where you're having this conversation maybe with your trusted advisor, your boss, or your spouse, and saying, these are the things I want to do. Maybe, how do we get this done together? Maybe with your family. It could be with that. All right. Do you see in the course of doing this, how when we have, the map. Well, I'll ask you about the map question in a second. How many people here have read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Okay, a bunch of you, great. Stephen Covey talks about, we have a circle of concern. How many people, since you guys are hand raisers, how many of you have concerns about something? Okay, good, all right. Just, you can fog a mirror too, that's good. What are some of the concerns that you have? It's a safe environment, feel free to. Fundraising, yeah, fund development, sure. Board demands, okay. Major gifts. What else? BlackBerry resources? Lack of resources. It's like, wow, BlackBerries? I remember those. That's so retro, Jade. Oh. And there's other things too. 10-year challenge. Is it really a 10-year challenge on Facebook, or is it a face algorithm thing so that facial recognition can be done? There's all sorts of things we can be concerned about. Did my doing a fundraising campaign on social media make it so that Putin knows who my donors are? There's all sorts of stuff that we could be concerned about. The Middle East, stock prices, tax laws. But we only have a much smaller circle of concern, a circle of interest, it's influence. So we have a circle of concern, and then we have a small circle of influence. What we need to do is build that circle of influence by being true to ourselves, by keeping commitments. We can't affect the tax law changes. We can't necessarily even affect the board entirely. But one of the biggest areas that has been researched of growing in influence and in leadership is keeping your commitments that you make to yourself. So at the time of this talk, we're at the beginning of the year. A lot of us have made New Year's resolutions or new commitments we want for the year. So if it's going to the gym, it's getting yourself to the gym. Maybe it's just showing up on time for appointments. I just got done from a training in Beirut, and the Beirut NGOs in Lebanon thought that they had to look professional. And so they were even going through, some of them were going through crazy things of borrowing a lot of money to rent Lamborghinis at galas so that the successfully rich people could see that they're also doing well because they have a rented Lamborghini. It totally didn't make any sense because the donors looked at them and thought, oh, they don't need the money. One of the attendees told me was, we don't need you to look professional. We need you to be professional. When we have an appointment, show up. When we make a donation, send a thank you note. So maybe that's where you grow in your influence. As you start doing that, people will start relying on you and trusting you more. As you start saying if your boss comes to you and says, I want this done, how long will it take? And instead of trying to be a people pleaser and say, I can do it right away, you say, it'll take about 2 weeks. Even though you know it's going to take about a week. I call it the Scotty principle. Remember Scotty on Star Trek? He'd always, I'm giving it all she's got, Captain. And he's not. He was holding like a 5% reserve. He could go a little bit more. But that way, it allows for the reality of stuff coming into your schedule. And as you keep holding those agreements with yourself and with others, you'll start growing in your area of influence and being able to have more influential influence in things going on in your community, in the organization, and maybe even in the world. I'm sure people here are going to do that. The Do you see, this is where I was going to ask you before the circles. So you see now how knowing that there's a map for our leadership journey can really help us press through that lack of confidence. Lack of confidence, it doesn't mean you're broken necessarily as a leader. It could mean that you're on the verge of an amazing discovery, something you're going to plow into, something you're going to find and create your own. You're going to create your own rules to the game. You're defining success in your own way for your own nonprofit. One of the reasons I'm so excited in the nonprofit space that we don't have outcomes measurements that are agreed upon yet is that we get to work with our donors, our board, and our staff and figure out what are the right impact measures, what are the right outcomes for our organization. And we get to tell the story our own way. We don't have to use some dumb formula like overhead or the overhead myth. We get to create our own. But that's scary because nobody else may be using the same impact measures. But we get to walk into that space and move into that much more focused space of a focused leader. I had mentioned that if you want the workbook, you can go to the link right there, concordleadershipgroup.com/magnet goals, or you can give me your business cards. I'll send you the slides. So if there's people you want to share this with, or get that. I'm also super excited because I just booked the room yesterday. Greenville 1, I'm going to be doing a full day of this, a workshop like this, a Quadrant 3 Leadership Intensive, right downtown in Greenville on February 21st. If you're like me, I can read a book and I won't actually do the stuff. I need someone to hold the space. For me in high school, it was SAT prep. I had the book, but I had to go to a course to actually do it. And you know what the guy did in the front of the room? He just read the book that I'd already purchased. So annoying, but it still got me to do the book. I will not read the book to you, but I'd love to. I'll send you information about that too if you're interested in that. And with that, I'm so honored that you guys let me be the first speaker for this year with you all. We need you all to lead. Our communities, our families, our world needs really strong leaders, and the ones that are here in this room, I'm super excited to see you guys, what you do, and come back in a year and see how much you've transformed the communities you're involved in. Thank you very much.